everyone. Welcome back to Open Up. Rhina Valentin, your host, Café con Leche, for the next hour. Who's inviting you to get social with us online. That is, tweet us and follow us on Instagram at BroxNet TV and like us on Facebook at Open BroxNet Television. While you're there, don't forget, follow moi on Twitter, FB, Instagram, Snapchat, and LinkedIn at Rhina Valentin. So, as we get closer to September, the big question is whether or not it will be safe for kids to go back to school in the fall. And according to Governor Cuomo, a region must be in phase 4 and the daily infection rate must remain below 5% using a 14-day average for schools to reopen. In the meantime, Mayor de Blasio and New York City Chancellor Richard Carranza have unveiled their blended learning plan for the city's 1.1 million students. And joining us to discuss more on these issues, we welcome United Federation of Teachers President Michael Mulgrew. Hello and welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope you're having a decent day in the middle of a pandemic in July and August. In July in New York City.
Yeah, July and August. You're already jumping into August because I already know where your mind is. I mean, it's unbelievable that the reopening of school is even already in the works. All right, so let's start with introducing who the United Federation for Teachers are.
Okay. United Federation of Teachers is actually, it's the largest union local in the entire United States. We have approximately a little bit over 200,000 members. We represent majority of people who work in schools, but we also represent a whole bunch of private sector employees, small businesses, as well as a lot of nurses. We represent nurses at both NYU, at the Northwell facility, and visiting nurse service. And we're just a bunch of folks. It's a union based on everyone who cares about people, who want to dedicate their life to caring about people and educating people.
So when you say represent, you show up as a union that represents on behalf of these individuals for what purposes?
Legally we are the holder of the collective bargaining certificate for all of those members, but we pride ourselves on being a lot more than just which we consider to be a traditional union.
Mm-hmm.
We are involved in so many different issues, both politically and social issues, throughout our history, and we take great pride in that. We also take great pride in our own diversity, which is quite large. Politically, we run the entire gamut, from hard right to hard left and everybody in between. And I love when we have delegate assemblies. That's our governing body. When a couple of thousand people get together, because those are some real great conversations that can be quite passionate at times.
So what kind of influence does the United Federation of Teachers have on the reopening of the schools this semester, this fall?
We've been doing more of the work. We've been doing this work since probably the second week of April. Our own staff started figuring out if we were going to do social distancing inside of the schools, what would that look like? By the end of April, we had already come to the conclusion that the only way if we could open schools safely, the only way to do it would be what is now being called a blended learning model. We were calling it a hybrid back then. And at that moment, we want to put it in context. We were at the height of the pandemic here in New York City. And
right.
Hopefully we don't have to go through that again. And that's really what we're basing all of our decisions on. But we had a lot to do with closing the schools. The mayor didn't want to do that. We had to go public in a major ugly fight to get the schools closed. But we're not, I want to be clear to everyone, we're not ready to open yet.
We're not.
We are not ready to open yet. We have a long way to go, and there's a lot of things that we can control, but there's a lot of things that are not in our control. So this is a steep hill we're trying to climb at this moment.
Understood. And so what kind of steps need to be taken, and where are we in those steps to reopening?
Well, City Hall just recently engaged in the process. When you spoke before about, we're already talking about reopenings in education world, mm-hmm. We start planning for the opening of school in a regular school year in April. So the fact that the mayor didn't announce that we were doing blended, which we knew was the only way we could get open until just recently, really has put us behind the eight ball.
Right.
So now what we have under our control is the safety conditions inside of every school. We're testing the airflow in each of the buildings. We're working with the Department of Ed and the principals union. We meet not just Zoom-wise, but we actually meet physically on a weekly basis. We do social distancing with our mask on because we want to know what we're asking people to do themselves. Programming buildings, asking parents, do you want your child to come back if you feel safe? If not, we have to arrange a remote learning process for you. That stuff we have control of. What we don't have control of is we don't believe that we can open safely without more funding. So that becomes a federal issue. And we're pushing very hard for the HEROES Act. And this union, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City, is now coordinating with 20 different states with teachers and parents in those states to try to get that money passed. Without that money, we don't see how we can open. And then the other piece is we don't know where the virus is going to be in New York City itself.
Right.
At the end of August, beginning of September, my favorite line is, we've been to hell and come back, and we don't want to go back to hell.
Right.
But what we see going on in the rest of this country, I mean, this is a big challenge that New York City is going to remain safe because, look, we're the epicenter of people traveling in and out of it.
Right. Right. And so, okay, so you're referencing the funding that the president is saying that he's not going to give us unless we reopen. So this is all a catch-22 going on here.
It really depends on how it's passed. Just because he's saying it doesn't mean it's going to be that way. And I don't know what his definition of real, look, when it comes to the president, I don't have much to say, okay?
I'm sorry to bring that into the conversation, but I'm thinking about our children,
when it comes to the president, I mean, it's clear he doesn't care about the health and well-being of children or the community. I mean, I think he's made it pretty obvious at this point where he sided on this. But for us, it's about the Senate. Will the Senate pass it? And if they do pass it, will it be veto-proof? And if they do it, we already know we have that in Congress, then it doesn't matter what he does at that point. But then it comes down to the virus itself here in New York City. And then go back to what we can control, and it's not just the union, but it's the city. Are we going to have all the PPE in place in every school building? Is the cleaning products going to be in place? Are we going to have extra custodial staff? All of these things, are the buses ready to go? And have we set up a way where you can transport children safely in the buses? Those things are under the city's control, but they're not done yet.
Right. And then it doubles up, right? Because we're talking about blended learning where it's alternate studies for the actual students, correct, right?
Yeah, there's different models, but basically some days you go to school and some days you don't. And when you're not in school, you're doing blended learning. We learned a lot about that over the last 4 months. Remember, we did it with no support, with no plan, no training. We did it without it. And I thought we were quite successful, especially when I looked at other school districts. We really did well, but it's no substitute for in-person learning. It's not even close. But we can make that better. And we have a team at the union right now putting together what would a blended learning day look like now that we have all this experience in it. And that's what we're hoping the Department of Ed and the city agrees to, because we're always trying to make things better because it's our school system.
Right.
We take great pride in it. It's ours. It's not the mayor's.
Right.
It wasn't Giuliani's. It wasn't Bloomberg's. It's not de Blasio's. It's our school system. You're the parent. It's your school system. It's your child's school system. And I wish that people, elected officials in New York City, would really speak of it that way. It's not their system. It's the community system.
So before we go, where do you see us going from here? Where we are right now in July?
Look, this is the worst summer I have ever had as an educator. And I know it will continue to be that way. If you ask me right now, I'd be 60% I'd be 60-40, 60% we're not going to reopen because of what's not in our control, as well as the challenges we have with the Department of Ed in New York City. But I think we have to plan for remote instruction, and we also have to plan for if we do have this blended learning model. It would be irresponsible if we did not try to make both of these things a reality if we get the opportunity to do it, and then leave it to parents to choose. And we have to understand that everything we decide is based on safety, safety, and safety at all times. As I said, we're not going back to hell, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, thank you for bringing it to our viewers and sharing your expertise and your concerns. Thank you, Michael Mulgrew, President.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Michael Mulgrew, United Federation of Teachers President. Once again, you guys, for more information on the United Federation of Teachers, and updates on the reopening of New York City schools, you can visit uft.org. All right, we have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll learn how one restaurant owner is bringing seasonings to the community.